Blood darkened the stranger's collar as Claire's headlights caught him stumbling across the empty road. Her foot struck the brake. The tires hissed over wet asphalt, and the paper cup in the console spilled cold coffee across her scrubs. For one suspended second, the man stood inside the white beams with one hand raised, his silver hair plastered to his forehead and his expensive black coat hanging crooked from his shoulders. Then his knees buckled. Claire stopped 10 feet short of him. Rain hammered the windshield hard enough to blur the road into trembling ribbons of light. The heater breathed dry air against her knuckles, carrying the sharp scent of coffee and hospital disinfectant. On the radio, a local announcer repeated the warning she had already heard twice that week. Drivers should avoid stopping for strangers along the county roads after dark. 3 people had disappeared nearby. Police had found one abandoned vehicle. Claire looked at the digital clock. 2:17 a.m. Her 12-hour emergency room shift had become 16, and her apartment was still 20 miles away. She could lock the doors, call 911, and keep driving. That was what the hospital security officer would tell her to do. It was what common sense demanded. Outside, the stranger tried to stand. His polished shoe slipped in the runoff, sending him down against the gravel shoulder. Claire saw no phone in his hands, no vehicle behind him, and no light from the bare fields on either side of the road. Only darkness, only rain, only an older man attempting to rise with blood spreading beneath his collar. Her thumb hovered over her phone. No signal. Of course, she whispered. She turned on the hazard lights. Their amber pulse flashed across the wet trees, bright, dark, bright again. Before opening her door, Claire took the heavy flashlight from beneath her seat and wrapped her fingers around its cold aluminum body. The wind shoved rain beneath her jacket the instant she stepped out. Water soaked through her shoes as she approached, leaving her socks icy against her skin. "Sir, can you hear me?" The stranger lifted his face. He looked to be in his late 60s, perhaps older, though his posture suggested a man unaccustomed to appearing weak. A shallow cut near his temple had mixed with rainwater, staining the edge of his white collar. His gaze moved past Claire toward her car, then searched the road behind her. "No police," he said. His voice was rough but controlled. "I didn't ask about the police." Claire crouched beyond his reach and angled the flashlight toward the ground rather than his eyes. "Do you know where you are?" His jaw tightened. "Cole, that makes 2 of us." She watched his breathing. Too fast. His hands trembled, but not with the loose, erratic movements of intoxication. The man pressed one palm against the gravel and forced himself upright. For a moment, he stood taller than she expected, his coat revealing a dark suit cut from fabric that did not belong on a deserted back road. Then his balance shifted again. Claire caught his forearm. The wool was saturated, heavy as a soaked blanket, and beneath it his skin felt unnaturally cold. He pulled away on instinct. Not violently. Precisely. "Where's your phone?" she asked. "Gone." "Your car?" He looked toward the black fields. "Gone." A low-engine note drifted somewhere beyond the trees. Claire turned, but no headlights appeared. The sound faded, leaving only rain rattling through dead branches. The stranger heard it too. His shoulders went rigid. Claire's grip tightened around the flashlight. Every warning from the radio returned at once, but so did the image of him collapsing after she drove away. She could lose her purse, her car, her sense of safety on every late-night commute that followed. Yet leaving him here carried a cost she knew she would hear in every monitor alarm at work. Claire stepped back and unlocked the passenger door. "Get in." His eyes settled on her, dark and assessing. "You don't know me. I know you're bleeding, freezing, and alone." She pulled the door open. Warm air escaped into the ring. "That's enough for the next 5 minutes." He remained still, as if kindness were the one danger he had not prepared for. Then he crossed the shoulder and lowered himself into the passenger seat. The leather creaked beneath his weight. Claire shut the door, hurried around the hood, and climbed behind the wheel with water streaming from her hair. She locked every door before placing the flashlight within reach. The stranger noticed. Something unreadable passed across his face. Claire shifted into drive. Her headlights pushed forward through the rain as the empty road disappeared behind them. "What's your name?" she asked. The man looked once into the side mirror, watching the darkness as though it might follow. Then he turned toward her. "Vittorio." Rain hammered the roof hard enough to blur every other sound, turning the sedan into a small metal chamber of heat and shadow. Beyond the windshield, the Tulane road shone black beneath Claire's headlights, its flooded edges vanishing into pine trees. A mile marker flashed past. Vittorio watched it disappear. Take the next right. Claire kept both hands on the wheel. Her damp scrubs clung coldly between her shoulders, and the car smelled of antiseptic wipes, wet wool, and the faint metallic trace rising from his coat. What's at the next right? A house. His voice remained controlled, but each word came slower than the last. White fence, green shutters. Someone waiting for you. Vittorio's gaze moved to the side mirror. Someone will come. The turn appeared through the rain, narrow and unmarked, with weeds growing through the gravel. Claire slowed. Her headlights swept across a rusted mailbox hanging open like a broken jaw. Farther back stood a dark farmhouse with half its porch collapsed and plywood covering every window. There were no tire tracks in the mud, no porch light, no power line running to the roof. Vittorio reached for the door handle before the car had fully stopped. This is enough. His fingers missed the handle and struck the window controls instead. Claire heard the soft click of his nails against plastic. Up close, his breathing had become shallow and unnaturally measured. His pupils looked too small in the dashboard glow. Who gave you medication tonight? The question sharpened the silence. Vittorio turned his head. For the first time, the authority in his expression slipped. No one. Then you won't mind telling me what day it is. His jaw tightened. Tuesday. It was Friday. Claire looked toward the abandoned house again. Rainwater poured from its ruined gutter. A chain hung across the front steps, orange with rust. Whatever Vittorio believed was waiting there had not existed for years. Unlock the door, he said. Not here. His hand closed around her wrist. The grip arrived fast, driven by instinct rather than strength, but the movement changed him. His shoulders straightened. His voice dropped into something colder. You agreed to drive me home, and you gave me an address where no one lives. That does not concern you. It concerned me when you got into my car. Lightning whitened the farmhouse. For one stark second, Claire saw the silver in his hair, the blood at his collar, and the confusion he was trying to bury beneath command. Then darkness returned. Vittorio released her. There was supposed to be a telephone inside. The windows are boarded up. It was maintained. Maybe once. Claire pressed 2 fingers to the inside of his wrist. His pulse raced beneath skin that remained dangerously cold. He tried to pull away, but his arm lacked the force it had possessed seconds earlier. A bitter chemical scent lingered on his breath beneath the rain and blood. Not alcohol, not the sharp fruitiness of diabetic crisis. Sedatives. Possibly more than one. Someone drugged you, she said. Vittorio stared through the windshield. The wipers dragged water aside and lost the battle immediately. Drive to the house. No. The word landed without volume, but it held. Claire shifted into reverse. Gravel snapped under the tires as the sedan backed onto the road. Vittorio's hand moved toward the door again. Where are you taking me? Somewhere warm, public, and staffed. No police. I didn't say police. No hospital. You don't get to choose an abandoned building while you can't identify the day. The engine climbed as Claire accelerated away from the turn. Vittorio studied the passing trees, calculating distances even through the fog in his mind. Then his eyes found the blue hospital parking decal at the corner of her windshield. You work in emergency medicine. Emergency room support staff. Then you understand that records can kill a man as easily as bullets. And breathing can stop before either one gets the chance. His mouth drew into a hard line. Pull over. Claire reached beneath the dashboard and switched off the illuminated hospital decal, then took the westbound fork instead of the highway leading toward her workplace. The route added 12 miles and carried them toward a 24-hour urgent care clinic beside a truck stop. Bright, occupied, and far enough from the abandoned property to break whatever arrangement had sent him there. You are making a dangerous decision, Vittorio said. So did you when you trusted whoever gave you that address. A tremor passed through his right hand. He concealed it beneath the fold of his coat, but not before Claire saw. The heater blew against his soaked clothing, filling the car with damp leather and medicinal bitterness. Ahead, distant signs glowed through the rain, red and white against the darkness. Vittorio's eyes closed for 2 seconds, then opened with effort. Claire. Hearing her name in his voice made her glance over. He nodded toward the hospital identification badge clipped to her scrub pocket. If the wrong people see me with you, They will remember your face. Claire removed the badge and dropped it into the center console. Then she pressed the accelerator. The abandoned house vanished behind them, along with the last route Vittorio had been instructed to follow. A minute later, his breathing caught. Once, sharply, and his hand rose toward his chest. "Don't stop the car," he whispered. "Whatever happens next, do not stop." Claire locked the doors again and drove toward the lights. The red clinic sign flickered less than 2 miles ahead when a thin, wet rasp rose above the heater. Vittorio's next breath did not come. Claire flicked on the hazard lights and guided the car beneath the white glare of a closed gas station canopy. Tires hissed over standing water. The engine idled with a low vibration beneath their seats. "You told me not to stop," she said, shifting into park. "You can argue when you can breathe." Vittorio remained upright only because the seat belt held him there. His silver hair clung to his forehead, and his fingers had locked around the fabric above his sternum. No swelling at the lips. No obvious obstruction. But every attempt to inhale produced a shallow whistle, while the pulse beneath Claire's fingertips hammered fast and unevenly. "Look at me." His eyes found hers, unfocused beneath the fluorescent light. Claire lowered the passenger seat, loosened his collar, and reached behind her own seat for the compact first aid bag she carried after 2 mini rural commutes past wrecks and overturned trucks. The zipper rasped open. Gauze, gloves, aspirin, a pulse oximeter, a sealed rescue breathing mask. Not enough equipment for a man deteriorating this quickly, but enough to keep him alive until she reached help. She clipped the oximeter onto his finger. The screen glowed against his pale skin, then settled on a number that made her jaw tighten. "Vittorio, did they give you anything besides whatever made you confused?" His eyelids fluttered. "Injection. Where?" He moved one hand weakly toward his left side. Claire pulled on gloves and opened his coat. Cold water darkened the expensive wool, releasing the smells of rain, leather, and that same bitter medicinal trace. Beneath the coat, his suit jacket had been torn near the ribs. The blood at his collar came from a shallow cut behind his ear, but a tiny puncture marked the skin above his waist. No label, no medical bracelet, no way to know what drug was moving through him. His chest hitched again. Claire fitted the rescue mask over his mouth and nose, braced his jaw, and delivered a controlled breath. His chest rose. A second breath followed, then a third, time between the weak efforts his body could still make. The canopy lights buzzed overhead. Rainwater ticked from the undercarriage onto concrete. Vittorio's hand suddenly closed around her wrist. Not hard, but deliberate. He drew one strained breath through the mask on his own. Then another. The pulse oximeter number climbed by degrees. Claire kept her hand steady until the rigid grip on her wrist loosened. "That's it," she said quietly. "Stay with me." When his breathing finally held a rough but workable rhythm, Claire removed the mask and reached into his inner pocket for identification. Her fingers met something colder and heavier than a wallet. She drew out a black leather case embossed with a silver crest, a crowned lion above the name Moretti. The same emblem appeared on a metal medallion inside, its edges worn smooth from years of handling. Claire had seen that crest before, not in the emergency room, but on newspaper photographs behind courthouse barricades, on black vehicles surrounded by federal agents, and above the doors of businesses people in the county discussed only after checking who might be listening. Moretti was not merely a surname. It was a warning. Vittorio's gaze sharpened the moment he saw the case in her hand. For the first time since she found him, the confusion withdrew completely. "Put it back." His voice was faint, yet command hardened every word. Claire returned the case to his pocket, but the boundary between an injured stranger and a dangerous world had already disappeared. "Are you Vittorio Moretti?" A muscle shifted in his jaw. "You should leave me here. You stopped breathing 30 seconds ago." Claire stripped off the gloves and dropped them into the open medical bag. "So that decision is no longer yours." Headlights swept across the gas station windows. A dark SUV slowed at the entrance, its tires whispering through the flooded gutter. Vittorio turned his face toward it, every trace of weakness replaced by attention. Claire shut the first aid bag, pushed the car into drive, and killed the hazard lights. Instead of continuing toward the bright clinic entrance, she pulled behind the station, where a narrow service road vanished between dripping pine trees. The SUV paused beneath the canopy they had just left. If that crest means what I think it means, Claire said, accelerating into the darkness, then the clinic is no longer safe. Vittorio watched the receding lights in the side mirror. Neither is your home. Rainwater streamed from the garage door in silver threads as the first gray light of morning pressed against the neighborhood. Claire eased the sedan beneath it, tires crackling over wet concrete, and watched the empty street in her mirror before lowering the door. Vittorio sat folded against the passenger seat, his breathing steadier now but still shallow. Someone you trust needs to collect you, she said. He gave her a phone number from memory. Claire called from a prepaid handset in her emergency bag, spoke only long enough to give the cross streets of an all-night laundromat, then drove him there through narrow residential lanes. A Blacktown car arrived 8 minutes later. 2 men stepped out, but Vittorio raised one hand, and they stopped instantly. Before leaving, he looked back at Claire through the rain-streaked window. Do not go home. Claire waited until the town car disappeared, then drove directly there anyway. Her mother's porcelain lamp still glowed behind the living room curtains. Nothing moved inside. No broken window. No unfamiliar vehicle at the curb. Yet when Claire crossed behind the sedan, a tiny green light blinked beneath the rear bumper. She crouched on the cold floor, the damp fabric of her scrubs tightening across her knees. Fixed beside the spare tire well was a black magnetic box no larger than a deck of cards. It had not been there yesterday. The device came free with a metallic snap. Warm plastic rested against her palm, humming faintly. Claire carried it to the workbench, dropped it into an empty coffee tin, and sealed the lid beneath a heavy wrench. Whoever had followed her could still see where the car had stopped. They did not need to know where the device went next. Her hospital phone rang before she could wash the road grime from her hands. The screen showed St. Matthew's Medical Center. Claire Bennett. The night administrator's voice was clipped, with keyboard taps sounding behind every word. Security reviewed footage from the emergency supply room at 4:17 this morning. It shows you removing a sealed rescue medication kit without authorization. Claire looked toward her open first aid bag. One compartment hung empty. In the rush to leave after her shift, she had taken the kit she normally used during hospital emergencies, believing she would return it before anyone noticed. Then Vittorio had stopped breathing. I used it on a patient in respiratory failure. There was no registered patient. There was a human being who couldn't breathe. Silence held for 2 seconds. The refrigerator clicked off, leaving only rain tapping the roof. You were off duty, outside hospital property, and had no physician's order, the administrator said. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation. Your badge access has been disabled. Do not report for your next shift. Claire's fingers closed around the damp edge of the workbench. 16-hour nights, double shifts, years spent earning certifications one class at a time, and now the blue badge at her waist had become a piece of dead plastic. If I had waited for permission, he would have died. The review board meets Friday at 9. If they determine the medication was stolen or improperly administered, termination will be recommended. The call ended. Claire removed her badge and set it beside the sealed coffee tin. One object represented the life she had built. The other represented the stranger whose life she had saved. Both had turned against her before sunrise. A soft electronic chirp came from inside the tin. Once, then twice. The tracker was still transmitting. Claire pulled on dry gloves, carried the container to the detached shed, and placed it inside an old metal toolbox at the back. Then she locked every window, photographed the device without opening it, and wrote down the exact time she had found it. No panic. No running. Evidence mattered, especially when powerful people expected fear to erase it. At 8:03, an email from hospital compliance appeared. Formal suspension, potential termination. At 8:04, the tracker stopped chirping. Claire stood in the kitchen beneath the weak yellow ceiling light, staring at the dark screen of her phone. Whoever had planted the device had just learned it was no longer moving. Somewhere beyond the dripping maples, an engine turned onto her street and slowed. White beams swept across the rain-darkened walls, followed by the low purr of 3 engines settling into silence. Black sedans stood nose to tail along the curb, their polished roofs beaded with water beneath the gray morning sky. Claire remained behind the locked front door, damp scrubs clinging coldly to her shoulders, while 6 men stepped onto the wet pavement without raising their voices. None approached the windows. None touched a weapon. They simply arranged themselves beneath the dripping maples as if the street already belonged to them. Then one man crossed the walkway alone. He was tall, perhaps in his early 40s, dressed in a charcoal overcoat that held the faint scent of rain and tobacco when he reached the porch. 3 measured knocks struck the wood. Claire checked the doorbell camera, then opened the door with the security chain still fastened. "Claire," the man said. His voice was quiet and controlled. "My name is Luca Moretti." The surname landed harder than the knocking. Claire kept one gloved hand behind the door, close to the heavy flashlight on the entry table. "Your father is breathing because I used medication I wasn't authorized to take." Luca's gaze moved to the hospital badge clipped crookedly against her scrubs, then to the formal suspension notice glowing on her laptop behind her. "I know what you did. Then you know what it cost." Rain ticked against the porch railing. Luca did not apologize. Men like him, Claire suspected, had learned to make silence perform the work of softer words. "Why did you take him somewhere safe?" he asked. "Why not call the police?" "He refused police. He was drugged, hypothermic, and losing his airway. I made the choice that kept him alive." "You trusted him?" No, her eyes stayed level with his. "I trusted what his pulse and pupils were telling me." Something shifted in Luca's face, not warmth, but recognition. "And after you saw his crest?" "I finished treating him." One of the men near the first sedan touched his earpiece. Luca raised 2 fingers without looking back, and the movement stopped immediately. Most people would have left him on that road. Most people weren't standing there. Luca studied the narrow hallway, the second-hand furniture, the pair of work shoes drying over a folded towel. "My father said you drove home despite his warning. This is my home. It may not be safe. Your people already made sure of that." Claire unhooked the chain. Luca's shoulders tightened as she opened the door fully, but she did not retreat. Instead, she stepped onto the porch, passed within inches of him, and walked through the cold drizzle toward the detached shed. Every man by the sedans watched her. The wet concrete chilled the soles of her shoes. She unlocked the shed, removed the old metal toolbox, and set it on the driveway between herself and Luca. The lid opened with a rusty scrape. Inside, the tracker sat isolated in its tin container. Claire lifted her phone and showed him the photographs, timestamps, and blinking transmission log. "This was attached beneath my car." Luca crouched without touching it. His expression hardened. "That device isn't ours." "I didn't ask whose it was." Claire closed the toolbox, the metal clap echoing beneath the garage awning. "I asked why you came here." "To learn why a stranger protected my father when people paid to protect him did not." Luca rose. For the first time, the men behind him appeared less like an escort than a wall waiting for his command. Claire removed her gloves 1 finger at a time. Her hands were pale from the cold, but steady. "Then start by proving you didn't bring the danger back to my door." Luca glanced toward the sedan. A broad-shouldered man stepped forward, carrying a compact scanning unit. Luca took it from him himself. "What are you asking me to do?" The question sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Claire pointed toward her sedan. "Remove every tracker, transmitter, or surveillance device on my property. Your men stay at the curb. You do it." A drop of rain slid from Luca's hair to the collar of his coat. Around them, no one moved. Claire had offered him no gratitude to purchase, no fear to reward, and no permission to take control of her home. Luca walked to the sedan, knelt on the wet driveway, and passed the scanner beneath its frame. A sharp electronic tone broke the silence. He reached behind the rear wheel well and removed a second device, smaller than the first. Luca held it beneath the weak garage light, his jaw locking as he recognized its construction. Claire looked from the device to the waiting men. "Now tell me who knew your father was in my car." Luca closed his fist around the transmitter. "That," he said, "is why none of us leaves this driveway until I know which one of them brought it here." Rainwater ticked against the garage door while the second transmitter rested in Luca Moretti's palm, black and glistening beneath the weak yellow bulb. Beyond the driveway, 3 sedans idled at the curb, their engines humming through the cold like restrained animals. Claire stepped inside only long enough to retrieve a clear evidence bag and a pair of nitrile gloves. When she returned, Luca's men were still standing beneath the street lamp, coats darkened by rain, each watching the others. Luca dropped the device into the bag without taking his eyes off them. "My father is alive because of you," he said. "Name your price." Claire sealed the plastic with a firm stroke of her thumb. Finding who left him in the road isn't a favor you do for me. Lucas studied her under the garage light. Water ran along the hard line of his jaw. Your hospital suspended you. The words landed more precisely than a threat. Claire's fingers stopped on the evidence label. Luca had learned about St. Matthew's in less than an hour. Pending a Friday review, he continued. I can send an attorney before sunrise. The medication charge disappears. If the hospital still terminates you, a private emergency clinic will hire you by noon. He nodded toward the house, toward its peeling white trim and narrow windows. There can also be compensation. Enough that you never work another night shift. One of his men opened a leather case beneath the shelter of an umbrella. Neat bands of cash caught the amber light. Claire looked at it for 1 second, then pushed the lid shut. The clasp snapped through the ring. No money. Luca's voice lowered. You may not understand what you're refusing. I understand exactly. Claire pulled off the wet gloves one finger at a time. Money makes me look bought. Your lawyer makes my decision look like something that needed to be erased. And a job from you means every patient I help afterward comes with your name attached. The man holding the case shifted his weight, but Luca raised one hand. Silence returned except for runoff gurgling through the gutter. Then what do you want? He asked. Claire took the bag containing the transmitter and placed it on the hood between them. Use everything you have to find the person who drugged Vittorio, put blood on his coat, and sent him toward an abandoned farmhouse. Luca's expression sharpened at the name. My father told you where he was going. He told me someone would meet him there. Did you see anyone? No. Did he name anyone? No. Claire held his gaze. That's why you need to find the person who expected him not to come back. Behind Luca, the rain blurred the men at the curb into dark vertical shapes. The offer had been easy for him. Money, influence, a clean correction made by morning. Claire's refusal demanded something else. It required him to turn his power inward. Luca reached into his coat and removed his phone. Lock down every vehicle, he told the person who answered. No one from my father's security detail leaves the city. Pull their movements from the last 24 hours, including mine. A voice crackled through the speaker. Luca cut it off. I said including mine. He ended the call, then faced his entourage. Phones on the sedan hood. Keys beside them. No one moved at first. Cold rain hissed on polished roofs. Then one phone appeared. Another followed. Metal keys struck the hood with small, hard clicks until the row resembled evidence rather than possessions. Claire had asked him to find one man. Instead, Luca had placed his own household under suspicion. You should take the attorney, he said without looking at her. Friday is closer than you think. And you should stop offering me safer ways to forget what happened. Luca turned. For the first time since arriving, the authority in his face carried no ready answer. Claire pointed toward the bag transmitter. Preserve that properly. Whoever attached it knew which car carried your father. Whoever sent him to that farmhouse knew he was drugged. Those facts meet somewhere inside your circle. Luca picked up the evidence bag by its sealed edge. If I begin this, I may not be able to keep your name outside it. My name entered it when I opened the passenger door. A gust drove icy mist beneath the garage canopy. Claire folded her arms against the cold but did not step back. Luca looked toward his men, then issued the order that changed the shape of the night. From this moment on, Claire is the only independent witness to what was done to Vittorio. No one contacts her. No one approaches St. Matthew's. Anyone who violates that answers directly to me. The men stood motionless beneath the rain. Claire had refused his protection, yet her choice had made her more exposed than money ever could. Luca slipped the evidence bag inside his coat. You wanted the person who abandoned my father, he said. Now everyone who knew his route has a reason to make sure you never identify them. At the curb, one of the surrendered phones began to ring. No one reached for it. Luca stared at the glowing screen, and the name displayed there drained the last trace of warmth from his face. Keep the doors locked, he said. The betrayal started before your car ever stopped. The surrendered phone kept vibrating against the steel workbench, its screen casting a pale rectangle across the rain-soaked garage. Luca did not answer it. Outside, water hissed beneath the idling sedans, and the air smelled of wet concrete, gasoline, and cold metal. Claire watched the name pulse on the screen until it vanished. Then she crossed to her sedan and opened the driver's door. There's something you haven't seen. Luca's men shifted behind him, but Claire ignored them. She leaned across the damp seat, reached beneath the dashboard and pressed the release on the dash camera. A memory card no larger than her thumbnail dropped into her palm. Luca held out his hand. Claire closed her fingers around it. Not until everyone steps outside. One of the men gave a humorless laugh. Luca turned his head. The sound died. Within seconds, the garage emptied of everyone except Claire and Luca. He pulled the interior door shut, sealing away the rain and the low growl of the engines. Claire inserted the card into an old laptop on a shelf beside a box of jumper cables. The cooling fan rattled awake. Grainy footage filled the screen. Black pavement, silver rain, Vittorio staggering through the headlights. Claire dragged the timeline backward. I thought the camera started when I turned onto the county road, she said. It records 3 minutes before impact detection. The image jumped. An SUV sat near the abandoned farmhouse with its lights off. 2 figures guided Vittorio onto the shoulder. His knees buckled. One of them pushed him upright while the others searched his coat. Luca bent closer, one hand braced against the workbench. The footage had no clear faces, only silhouettes blurred by rain. Then a woman's voice came through the dash camera's microphone, faint beneath the windshield wipers. Leave him alive. Luca signs over the port when his father disappears. The garage seemed to contract around those words. Claire increased the volume. A second voice asked what would happen if Vittorio reached a phone. The woman stepped briefly into the wash of Claire's distant headlights, lifting one hand to shield her face. A diamond flashed at her finger. Luca froze with his eyes fixed on the screen. Play it again. Claire did. This time, the woman turned far enough for the camera to catch her profile. Luca reached into his coat and placed the surrendered phone beside the laptop. The name that had appeared moments earlier still waited in the missed call notification. Elena. Claire looked from the screen to him. Your fiancé? His jaw tightened once. She knew my father's route. She knew which security team would be with him. And she knew the port agreement is the only document I would sign under pressure. The twist required no elaborate conspiracy. Elena had arranged Vittorio's disappearance, planning to trade his return for control of the Moretti docks. Claire removed the memory card, but Luca caught her wrist. Not hard, only fast. That card is the reason they tracked your car. Claire met his stare until his fingers released her. Then it stays with me until I know what you're going to do with it. A sharp chime cut through the garage. The laptop had connected to Claire's home network and restored the dash camera's pending mobile notifications. One alert had arrived less than a minute earlier from the camera's companion app. Remote access attempt detected. Another appeared beneath it. Live location requested. Luca took the surrendered phone and unlocked it using the code one of his men had provided. A message thread was already open. The newest message had been sent while they watched the footage. Witness confirmed at residence. Team arriving in 6 minutes. Claire pulled her wristwatch toward the light. 4 minutes had already passed. Beyond the garage door, one of Luca's sedans suddenly flashed its headlights twice. Not a signal from his men. A reflection from another vehicle turning into the dark end of the street. Luca reached for his own phone, but Claire seized the garage remote first and killed the exterior lights. Darkness dropped over the house. They expect you to hide me, she whispered. So don't. She ejected the memory card, slipped it into the hollow handle of her first aid kit, and handed Luca an empty plastic adapter. Let them believe you took the evidence. Tires rolled slowly over the wet asphalt outside, close enough for both of them to hear water peeling from the tread. Luca looked at the false card in his palm, then at Claire standing beside the car that had carried his father out of the rain. For the first time that night, the woman he had come to question was setting the terms of his survival. A white beam swept beneath the garage door and stopped. Someone was standing on the other side. Then the handle began to turn. Cold rain hissed against the garage door as the handle descended another inch. Rubber scraped over concrete outside, followed by the muted click of a weapon being readied. Claire stepped behind the sedan, one hand resting on her first aid kit. Luca slipped the empty adapter into his coat pocket and raised his phone. Open it, he said. Claire stared at him across the darkness. That wasn't the plan. It is now. Luca switched on the garage lights. White fluorescence flooded the room, exposing both of them before the door rolled upward with a metallic shutter. 3 figures stood in the rain. One aimed toward Claire. The other 2 shifted when they saw Luca between her and the doorway, holding no weapon, only the plastic adapter between 2 fingers. Elena wants this. His voice carried through the smell of wet pavement and motor oil. She can have it. He tossed the decoy onto the driveway. The nearest attacker bent to retrieve it while Luca's men emerged from the shadows along both sides of the house. No shots followed. Instead, engines revved at the curb, and the three intruders retreated toward their vehicle with the false evidence. Luca's security detail moved to pursue them, but he lifted one hand. Let them go. Claire understood before anyone else did. Elena's people would return to her believing the witness had lost the only proof. For the moment, Claire's home was no longer their target. But the reprieve lasted only until Luca's phone began ringing. Elena's name glowed against the rain-speckled screen. He answered on speaker. Her voice came smooth and warm, as though she were calling about dinner. Bring me the card, Luca. Sign over the port before sunrise, and your father comes home alive. Claire's fingers tightened around the textured handle, concealing the real memory card. Elena did not know Vittorio had already been transferred to safety. Luca could exploit that mistake, preserve his control of the port, and destroy her operation from inside the empire. His advisors rushed into the garage, voices overlapping. Keep Elena talking. Trace the call. Mobilize the crews. Lock down the docks. Every solution protected the organization that had made Luca powerful. Every solution also prolonged the danger surrounding Claire's small house. Luca watched rainwater run from the garage threshold toward her worn work shoes. Then he silenced his advisors with a glance. You wanted the port, he told Elena. You can have my authority over it. Every route, every contract, every vote. Effective tonight. The garage became still except for the ticking engine of Claire's sedan. One of Luca's men lowered his phone. Another whispered his name in disbelief. The port was not property he could buy back later. It was the center of his influence, the machinery that kept rivals cautious and allies obedient. Surrendering it would fracture his command before morning. Elena laughed softly. You expect me to trust a promise? Luca removed the Moretti signet ring from his hand and set it on Claire's steel workbench. Gold struck metal with a small, final sound. My attorney will transmit the signed transfer within 30 minutes. In return, your people stay away from Claire and her home. You would dismantle your own empire for a stranger? No, Luca said, looking directly at Claire. I'm dismantling the part that taught you an innocent life was negotiable. He ended the call before Elena could answer. Claire crossed the cold floor and placed the first aid kit beside his ring. If you surrender the port, she gets what she wanted. She gets an empty throne. Luca ordered every armed man off Claire's property, then instructed his attorney to prepare the irrevocable transfer. No retaliation. No hidden loyalists at the docks. No attempt to reclaim control through Vittorio's name. The commands stripped him of leverage one sentence at a time. Finally, he took a rain-darkened business card from his wallet and wrote a private number across the back. The real evidence goes to federal prosecutors, not to me, he said. Your choice. Your terms. Claire did not pick up the card. Through the open garage, dawn remained hours away, and Elena still believed she had won. Lucas stepped into the rain alone, leaving his ring on the workbench and his empire behind him. At the driveway, he stopped without turning. When this is over, I'll come back without the cars, without the men, and without anything to offer that you didn't ask for. Behind him, Claire closed her hand around the first aid kit. The next time Luca Moretti came to her door, there would be no army standing behind him, and no power left to hide behind. Morning light pressed through the kitchen blinds in pale silver bars, catching on the untouched business card and the Moretti ring beside it. The house smelled of cold coffee, antiseptic, and rain-soaked wood. Claire had spent the remaining darkness making one choice after another. Copies of the footage to federal prosecutors, the original card sealed in an evidence envelope, and a statement sent to St. Matthew's explaining exactly why she had taken the emergency medication. By sunrise, Elena's belief that Vittorio remained under her control had collapsed. Federal agents recovered him alive, drugged but stable, from a warehouse near the port. Elena was arrested before she could leave the city. Luca kept his bargain, signed documents, surrendered his control of the docks, and the organization that had once obeyed his name fractured without a shot being fired. At 11, the St. Matthew's night administrator called. The Friday review had been moved forward. Claire listened while the administrator formally withdrew her suspension, acknowledged that the medication had prevented a fatal respiratory collapse, and offered her immediate reinstatement. "Put it in writing," Claire said, "and add a policy protecting workers who act in a documented emergency." Silence moved across the line. Then came the quiet clicking of a keyboard. "Agreed." Claire ended the call only after the revised letter reached her inbox. This time, compassion would not survive merely because powerful people approved of it. It would have protection after they were gone. Near dusk, another knock crossed the small house. No engines idled at the curb. No polished shoes crowded the porch. Through the frosted glass stood a single man in a charcoal coat darkened by a light rain, his hands empty and his right ring finger bare. Claire opened the door, but left the chain fastened. Luca Moretti looked older without the black sedans behind him. Water traced the edge of his collar. There was a faint bruise beneath one eye, but no weapon under his coat and no command waiting in his voice. "My father is safe," he said. "The doctors expect him to recover." Claire studied the wet pavement beyond him. And Elena? In custody. The footage was enough. The port. His jaw tightened once. "No longer mine." Luca reached into his pocket slowly and removed a folded sheet of paper. He slid it through the narrow opening instead of asking to enter. It was a notarized declaration relinquishing every claim to Claire's recording, followed by confirmation that no Moretti employee, associate, or attorney would contact her again. At the bottom, beneath his signature, was a second promise. Vittorio's security detail would cooperate fully with federal investigators. Claire read every line. "You could rebuild," she said. "Probably." Rain ticked against the porch railing. But then leaving the ring would have been theater. For the first time, Luca did not tell her what he could give, fix, buy, or destroy. He only stood in the cold while she decided whether the man at her door was different from the one who had arrived with an army. Claire unhooked the chain. She did not step aside. Instead, she placed the Moretti ring in his palm. Luca stared at the heavy gold against his skin. "I left this here. I know. It doesn't belong in my house." Her eyes remained steady. "And it doesn't decide who you are next." His fingers closed around it, but he did not put it on. From inside came the soft chime of Claire's email. The hospital's revised emergency policy, signed and effective immediately. Luca glanced toward the sound, then back at her. "You saved my father when you had every reason to drive past him. He needed help. And when I came here, you made me understand that rescuing someone doesn't give you ownership of their life." Claire opened the door another inch. Not an invitation, only an acknowledgement. "What will you do now?" Luca looked toward the empty street, where rainwater shone beneath the amber lamps. "Testify. Accept what follows. Then learn how to knock on a door without expecting it to open." Claire gave one small nod. That was all he had earned. Luca descended the steps alone, carrying the ring instead of wearing it. At the sidewalk, he turned back once. Claire remained in the doorway, warm light behind her, the first aid kit resting on the table where fear and power had both failed to take it from her hands. Hours earlier, a mafia boss had come demanding an explanation for her mercy. Now a man with nothing left to command had returned to answer for his own choices. Claire closed the door gently, not because she feared him, and not because she owed him forgiveness, but because the choice was finally hers. And that day, Luca Moretti learned that dignity begins where power stops knocking and humility waits to be let in.